Well, you only get to write history one page at a time, and this race was a historic moment in NASCAR. It was a pretty damn good race, too. Let's get into it. This is the fuel. What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the Packer Man, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel. For today, we're going to be talking about the 2020 Bank of America ROVAL 400 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway's infield road course. And let me tell you, the feeling coming out of this race is a lot different than last week. Last week we had the total, shit show of finish, with all the controversy and all that stuff like that, which to me completely ruined the finish of the race. And while we didn't get a finish like that in this race was still pretty damn good, all things considered, and it had a bit of an historic flavor to it as well, becoming the first Cup Series race in its entire history to race on the wet weather tires. Now, was it actually raining during this race? Maybe a lightish rain at the start, but that's really about it. All of the rain basically took place during the morning and during the previous day, during the Xfinity race. And that race was completely fucking bonkers, to say the least. But that was a glorious race, and to see those guys just wheeling in around and those types of conditions, and to see them racing on the fucking banking in the weather on a wet track, it was just absolutely crazy. And my hat's off to all of those drivers that gave it their all in that Xfinity race yesterday. That was crazy. Didn't see the same amount of wet weatherness in the Cup Series race, but it started out on a wet track, so that definitely led some credence to the fact that it did start on the wet weather tires. I mean, it wasn't a downpour like I think a lot of us were expecting, but the fact that they started on a wet track and then it transitioned into a dry track, that really shook things up. And it's like, holy crap, you have changing track conditions from wet to dry, and since it started on a wet track, NASCAR said, you know what, once it starts on a wet track, then it's up to the crew chiefs to decide what tires they want to put on the cars. And some teams stuck with the wet weather tires for almost the entire stage, but there was a couple that went to dry tires to start with in the middle of this is particularly in the first stage. There were a few drivers like Ty Dillon who went to the dry weather tires, the slicks basically, and were like 5 seconds faster than those on the wet tires because the track was starting to dry up. Even though it was damp, there was a lot of grip in the slicks. Certainly a lot more than in the wet weather groove tires, and it really shook things up. There was actually a lot of legit passes for the lead in this race as well. I mean, this was a super competitive race. There were more pure lead changes in this race than in both Poconos and Indianapolis combined. Wrap your head around that shit. But the feeling coming out of this race is a lot more positive. Like, it was a good race, much like last week. Well, I can't really say much like last week because, Talladega is kind of its own thing. But, yeah, in terms of road course racing, this was definitely a damn good race. Super competitive, changing weather conditions, and no bullshit controversy for once. So that's good. That's a good thing, because that shit was a headache inducer last week. And this week, we get to talk about a couple of historic events that actually took place, with Chase Elliott getting his 4th consecutive victory on a road course, which puts him into number 2 all time in that category as far as consecutive wins. The guy who has the most consecutive wins all time on a road course is Jeff Gordon, when he won 6 in a row. And considering the fact that there are going to be 6 road course races next year, that's a lot more opportunities for Chase Elliott to rack up some more wins. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the news of the week, because there's a lot to talk about. Lots of silly season stuff, and of course I want to talk about the schedule for next year. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so we have actually quite a bit of silly season news this week. Starting with Hendrick Motorsports. There was a lot of speculation as to who was going to take over the 48 car in 2021, and they finally answered that question. Alex Bowman. Yes, one of the guys that they already have hired. He's also on a 1-year deal for Hendrick Motorsports, but now he's going to be tapped to drive the 48 car in 2021, which means that leaves the 88 car open. So there was some speculation as to whether or not the 88 car was going to be shut down, or if they were going to find a new driver. They actually asked Rick Hendrick if there was going to be any drivers that would replace Bowman in the 88, since he's moving over to the 48, and Hendrick said just wait and see. So it tells me that he is going to find a driver for the 88 car, but we have no other details beyond that. But how about Alex Bowman? I mean, holy shit, dude. I remember a couple years ago he was driving for backmarker teams. Then he played, he was in the Roberto Moreno role, the super sub driver, when Junior was injured. He drove the 88 car at Phoenix. Y'all remember that? And you remember how good he drove there and almost won the race? That kind of got Hendrick's attention. It's kind of like, you know what? You know, maybe Alex Bowman needs to be the guy to hire after Junior retires. And he got the 80 car on Junior's recommendation, and it's worked out pretty well for him so far. You know, he's won twice in his career so far, and both were pretty well. The Chicagoland one was a pretty dramatic victory after a fantastic duel with Kyle Larson, and then earlier this year he won at Auto Club in pretty dominating fashion. His summer stretch kind of fell off, but it seems like that 88 team has rekindled the magic a little bit, and they're going to be advancing to the round of 8, which we're going to be talking about that in a minute. And he was also the subject of a pretty big deal after the race, which, again, we're going to be talking about that. But who would have thought that Alex Bowman would replace both Dale Jr. And Jimmy Johnson after they retired? One lucky son of a bitch. Moving on with more silly season news. It was announced in a bit of a surprise that Clint Bowyer is going to be retiring at the end of the 2021 season, and he's going to be moving on to the Fox Sports broadcast booth, joining Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy in 2021. And of course, we all remember what happened years ago when Bowyer and Gordon got into that little schmozzle at Phoenix. But it's pretty obvious that they've smoothed things over since then. But it's going to be really interesting to see Clint Bowyer and Jeff Gordon in the same booth together, to say the least, with Mike Joy in between them. It was just Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy this year in the Fox Sports booth, but they're going to finally get a third man in there, and it's Clint Bowyer. So, I mean, has Clint Bowyer had a Hall of Fame worthy career? I mean, if you count his Xfinity success, because he is a former Xfinity Series champion, probably. I mean, his Cup career hasn't always been the best, and there have been. I mean, I think he went through like a 6-year stretch in between victories. So, I'm not going to say it's Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but I mean, did he have a nice long career in the Cup Series? Yeah, I would say so. And there were parts of his career where he was absolutely brilliant. I mean, he did finish runner-up in the points in 2005, I believe. No, it wasn't 2005. It was wasn't it 2000? God, I can't remember now. Was it 2012 that he finished second in points? Because I think the next year was when Spingate happened. Yeah, I think it was 2012 he finished second in points. Because 2013, I think, was when Spingate happened. So, I mean, he's had his highs, he's had his lows, but I will be talking more about him when it comes to the end of the race, because I mean, he put in a Herculean effort here at the ROVAL this weekend for a reason not of his own doing. We'll get to that when we get to it. Next up, there's going to be a new team called Trackhouse next year, and one of the guys that are heading that effort is Justin Marks. If you don't know who that is, he was basically the guy who won the Mid-Ohio rain race in absolute monsoon-like conditions. I mean, he was basically the class of the field in that race, and won one of the best races of all time, in my opinion. But he's actually going to be starting a new team next year called Trackhouse Racing, and the driver that they have tapped is Daniel Suarez. So Daniel Suarez, who's been driving for Gaunt Brothers Racing this year, the 96 car, is going to be moving over and driving for Trackhouse in 2021. So we don't have any idea who's going to be driving for the 96 car next year. But we know where Suarez is going to be. He's going to remain in the Cup Series, which I think is a good thing. You know, because I like Suarez. I really do. You know, he hasn't really delivered as far as, you know, what his talent is capable of. I mean, he was in 2 really good cars, and, you know, really didn't do much with them. But I do like Daniel Suarez. I did meet him one time at Columbus Motor Speedway when he was in the K&N race, and he actually ended up winning that race. And of course, he's also a former Xfinity Series champion. You know, I mean, the first Hispanic driver to accomplish that feat. So, you know, the fact that Suarez is going to continue to drive in the Cup Series is great. Hopefully, Trackhouse Racing will be able to find their footing relatively quickly. You know, we actually have a couple new teams coming in. We got Trackhouse, and of course, we got Michael Jordan's team coming in. So, next year is going to be really interesting, I think. And of course, with the new car right around the corner, I think 2021 and 2022 are going to be really interesting to watch. And also another good thing, another guy who's going to remain in the Cup Series and driving for the same team next year is Matt DiBenedetto. There was a lot of speculation as to whether or not he was going to be re-signed to the Wood Brothers for 2021, considering that they are a Penske satellite team at the moment, and considering that Austin Cindric has been pretty much tearing it up this year in the Xfinity Series. There was a lot of speculation that Matty D was going to be jettisoned from the 21 car in favor of Austin Cindric. But considering Matty D's performances in the last couple races, they decided to go ahead and re-sign him for 1 more year. But they did let him know that he's not going to be able to race his way back into a contract for 2022, because they pretty much have Austin Cindric lined up for the 21 car for 2022. So technically, Matty D is still going to be racing for a ride. He just has 1 more year to basically, what's the word I'm looking for? Audition for another ride. Because it's pretty obvious he's not going to be in the 21 car beyond 2021. But I'll tell you what, if he somehow snags that first win between now and the end of next year, I think he'll have some big-time teams knocking at his door. He probably won't be getting the 14 car, though, because going back to Clint Boyer for a second, since he's retiring, a lot of people were speculating about him. It's like, well, who is going to be the driver of the 14 next year? I mean, it's pretty freaking obvious at this point. I mean, it's all but confirmed, but I think it's pretty obvious it's going to be Chase Briscoe. I mean, Briscoe's been absolutely on fire in the Xfinity Series. I mean, he has 8 wins in the Xfinity Series this year. Clearly the odds-on favorite to win the title. But even if he doesn't win the title, I mean, the team that he's driving for in the Xfinity Series is Stewart-Haas. And Ford has obviously got, you know, they've invested a lot in him, and considering how he's been absolutely tearing it up in the Xfinity Series, I mean, he's the obvious choice to replace Clint Boyer in the 14 car. You know, to me, he is the obvious choice. So I'll be very surprised if it's anyone other than Chase Briscoe in that 14 car next year. So there you go. That's all the silly season news that I've seen this week. That's really worth noting. Of course, there's probably going to be more. I mean, Eric Jones still doesn't have a ride lined up. There's a lot of speculation that since Bubba Wallace is going to be driving for Michael Jordan's team next year, there's a lot of speculation that Eric Jones might be sliding into the 43 car for Richard Petty Motorsports. Of course, that's just speculation. But then again, he might also be sliding into the 88 car for Hendrick Motorsports next year. We don't really know. I mean, there's a lot of drivers that are still kind of up in the air right now. And there's reported that Ty Dillon can't get a Cup Series ride since Germain Motorsports or Germain Racing is shutting down at the end of the year, since Geico's not going to be coming back as a sponsor for him. He's probably going to be going to RCR's XFinity team for the 2021 season. So, there's that. But that's pretty much it for the silly season stuff. Now let's get into the schedules for both IndyCar and NASCAR. It wasn't too long ago that because of the fact that IndyCar seemed to have new races every single year, there was always this sense of excitement when it came to the revealing of the IndyCar Series schedule, and virtually no excitement for the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, because virtually nothing changed about the Cup Series schedule, because it was just the same shit every year. It was just the status quo, and it got really stagnant. And on the other hand, you have the IndyCar Series that seem to be adding a new race every year. And while it's nice to have some stability, the constant shuffling of races made the schedule feel fresh. It made the product feel fresh. Because it's like you never know what's going to be around the next bend. You know what I mean? And that was a huge appeal in the IndyCar Series. Man, has this script been flipped. Because I'm looking at the 2021 IndyCar Series schedule, and I'm just thinking to myself, what the fuck, dude? Because this is mainly dominated by road courses, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The only problem is they only have 4 oval races next year on 3 ovals. There's only going to be 3 different ovals next year. 4 oval races. 2 of those are at Texas Motor Speedway. Like, are you fucking serious, dude? Why would you want to go to Texas Motor Speedway twice? That race is fucking trash. There have been some great races at Texas in the past, but not lately. Not lately. So, I'm looking at the schedule, and it's like there's no Iowa. There's no Richmond. They were supposed to go to Richmond this year, and then that got canceled because of COVID. And now they've decided that I guess the boys at Richmond decided, we're just not going to go next year, which I think is absolutely fucking stupid. There's no COTA either, because I guess because of the fact that they had to cancel the Formula One race, that put them in basically a bit of a financial burden. And I guess there's rumors going around that COTA might be up for sale, which is probably one of the reasons why they managed to get the Cup race next year at COTA, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But don't get me wrong. I like the fact that there's road course races on the IndyCar Series schedule, but you gotta balance it out. And only having 4 oval races next year, it just I don't like it, to be honest. There are some new. Well, I shouldn't say it, some. There is one new race that I'm going to be talking about that I think is pretty cool. But the fact that they're going to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway road course twice, like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you couldn't replace one of those 2 with an oval race? Why couldn't you have gone to Chicagoland? Chicagoland, we're going to be talking about that in a bit, lost their Cup race. So they really don't have any big league races going to their track next year. Why not IndyCar? That's the thing I don't understand. Yeah, it's a high-speed oval, but Jesus Christ. Some of the pretty much every race at Chicagoland when the IndyCar Series was there was fucking gold. IndyCar in Chicagoland was like chocolate and peanut butter. It was a match made in heaven. That race featured some of the best racing that I've ever seen in open wheel racing, with photo finishes, mad 2 and 3 wide racing, lead changes, and they didn't have restrictor plates. They didn't have any of that bullshit. You know, it was just pure unadulterated racing, and it was awesome. And when they took it off the IndyCar schedule in the early 2010s, it just left such a bitter taste in my mouth, because it's like, why would you do that? You know, and now you had an opportunity to get Chicagoland back on the schedule, considering that, you know, they don't have a Cup Series race next year. I mean, they would probably kill for an IndyCar race right now. You know, to have a big league race at their track next year. You had a chance to do that, Roger Penske. What the fuck, dude? I mean, what the fuck is this? So you have the St. Petersburg Grand Prix on March the 7th. You know, that's typical. I mean, that's the typical opener. They weren't the opener this year because obviously of COVID, but they did get St. Petersburg back on the schedule, and they'll actually be the finale. So they're going to be in the interesting position of being the finale for this year and the opener for next year. Then you have Barber, Long Beach in April. That's pretty standard. But then they're going to have Texas, a race that's typically been in June after the Indianapolis 500. They're going to have that on May the 1st and the 2nd as the doubleheader, which, okay, whatever. Then you have the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course race, the first one. Yes, there's going to be two next year on May the 15th. I mean, NASCAR seemed to work really well with it, but IndyCar, not really so much. Then you have the 105th Indianapolis 500 on Memorial Day weekend, which is pretty standard. The doubleheader at Belle Isle, Road America, of course, which is always a good race. Mid-Ohio. They're returning to Toronto next year. Then, of course, the new one, which is the Streets of Nashville on that quirky circuit that's going to go back and forth across their little bridge, which is going to be pretty interesting to watch. So I'll actually be really interested in that race. Then you have the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Road Course again. Then Gateway, which is the last oval of the year. And then Portland and Laguna Seca, which I do like Laguna Seca. But that's basically it. It's back up to a 17 race schedule, but the lack of ovals is just really troublesome to me. So I don't like the schedule, and there were a lot of people that didn't like it either. So it's like, yeah, where are the ovals, man? Where are the ovals? Conversely, we look at the 2021 Cup Series schedule, and holy hell basket. If there was ever a year for a shakeup, this was it. But before we get into all that, I want to talk a little bit about the 5 tracks that ended up losing a date. There were 3 tracks that lost one of their 2 dates, and then there were 2 tracks that lost their lone date. Let's talk about one of those tracks that lost their lone date, and I referred to this earlier, Chicagoland. This year they weren't able to hold their Cup race due to COVID, so their race was canceled and shuttled off to a different track. It was either Darlington or Charlotte, I can't remember. But yeah, Chicagoland lost their Cup race for this year, and as it turned out, they would lose their Cup date for 2021. I'm hearing ambulance. Don't know what that's about. Trying to do a freaking review here, and I got freaking an ambulance going by my house. But out of all the tracks that ended up losing a date, Chicagoland to me just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the last couple races at Chicagoland have been bangers. You know what I mean? And Chicagoland is at a point where its asphalt is at its prime condition. You know, because after you repave a track, it's going to take a few years for it to age and to really set in, so that way the racing really becomes good. And Chicagoland had finally reached that point where the track was in prime condition, and as a result, the last couple races have been absolutely awesome. And I've said in the past that the IndyCar racing there was absolutely awesome. So the fact that Chicagoland was one of the tracks that lost its date, and it was its lone date, which is pretty crazy considering that was just a couple years ago that it had 2 dates and now it has none. Chicagoland being taken off the schedule just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I realize it's a 1.5 mile oval, and we have way too many 1.5 mile ovals as it is, but to me, Chicagoland was starting to come into its own with its pavement, and the racing was actually getting pretty good at Chicagoland. So them losing a date just doesn't make any sense. I mean, especially when you consider that Kansas still has 2 dates. Why couldn't you have taken one of Kansas's dates away? You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why would you take a date, Chicagoland's only date, and Kansas, which is basically similar, but has had shittier racing, they keep their 2 dates? That doesn't make any sense to me. But as far as the other 4 tracks are concerned, Michigan, Dover, Texas, and Kentucky, honestly, I'm glad they lost their dates, because let's be honest here, the racing at all 4 of those tracks has been fucking trash for a good number of years now. I mean, Dover, they're losing one of their dates. Well, technically they are losing one of their dates, but in their case, they're having one of their dates shipped off to the Nashville Super Speedway, because the same ownership group owns both Dover and Nashville. And considering that, you know, there's been a push to try to get the Nashville Fairgrounds back on the schedule at some point, I think NASCAR wants to gauge the interest in, I guess there's someone, interesting. But they want to gauge the interest in motorsports in Nashville, especially considering that IndyCar is going there next year for a street course race. So they kind of want to gauge things a little bit. I do find it a little bit weird that they're going to a track that's basically been dormant for the better half of a decade. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, technically it is another, you know, one of them weird D-shaped ovals, but it's a concrete track, and it's only about 1.3 miles in length. I mean, it's a unique racetrack, I'll tell you that much. And it's a 1.3 mile racetrack that's concrete. So, you know, and concrete, you know, tends to last for quite a while, you know what I mean? So, and they've been getting it prepped for next year's race, and they got plenty of time. That race isn't until June the 20th. But the fact that Dover's only going to have 1 race next year, I'm fine with that, because that race has sucked for many years, as has Michigan. I mean, that race has sucked. Texas Motor Speedway, I mean, I've already made my feelings known about that track. I mean, yeah, they had a decentish race earlier this year, but by and large, Texas Motor Speedway has been fucking garbage. You know, they're losing their one of their 2 dates, but they are gaining the All-Star race, but that's a non-points race, so it's like whatever. I will be talking about where that Texas date is being shipped to. And then there's Kentucky Speedway, which had 1 date on the Cup Series schedule, but is not going to have it for 2021. I'm just going to be completely blunt here. Its only decent race that it's had was 2015, but other than that, the racing at Kentucky was ass hammers. Like, it was garbage. No matter what they tried to do. I mean, the racing was absolute trash for the Cup Series. And I found it funny that the governor of Kentucky, was basically put out a statement stating how disappointed that they are that NASCAR is not going to be at Kentucky next year. You know, it's saying, oh, it's a great event, you know, and all this other bullshit. And it's like, dude, the only reason why you're upset is because you're going to be losing out on all of them tax dollars, because the Cup race is not going to be there next year. That's the only reason why you're even making this, you know, announcement or this statement about NASCAR not going back to Kentucky Speedway. I mean, that's the only reason why you're paying attention to this. It's trying to say it's a great event when it hasn't been. It's been fucking trash. But the only reason why you're making a stink about it is because you're going to be losing out on all them tax dollars. That's really the only reason. So, cut the bullshit. The racing there has been fucking trash, and I've been saying it needs to be taken off the schedule for years, and they finally did it. So, thank fucking God for that. But that being said, let's go through the schedule real quick. I say that as I'm almost half an hour into this section of the fucking video. This is going to be a long one, much like last week, because there's a lot to talk about. But it starts things out with the Clash Tuesday, February 9th, which is weird. That's typically been the Saturday night before, the week before the Daytona 500. But they did say that they wanted to shrink, kind of condense Speed Weeks a little bit, or condense the schedule a little bit, but I don't think Speed Weeks is really the spot to do it in. But, you know, it's whatever. But the Clash is actually going to be taking place on the infield road course. So kind of similar-ish to the road course race that we saw at Daytona earlier this year. We basically got an early preview of that, except it's going to be at the Clash this time on February 9th. And, of course, you have the duels on February 11th. And then the Daytona 500 on February the 14th. Here's things we get switched around a little bit. Homestead Miami Speedway, which was originally scheduled to be the 6th race of the year this year. Of course, it got postponed. Is going to be moved to the 2nd race of the year, Sunday, February the 21st. Logistically, this does make sense because this does eliminate one cross-country trip for the Cup Series, because, you know, before they had started at the Daytona 500, then did the West Coast swing, and then they would have to come all the way back east, and it's just like, you know, it'd basically be one extra trip. So having Homestead Miami as the 2nd race of the year, you know, that's fine. You know, 2 races in Florida start things out before heading to the West Coast swing. You know, I'm fine with that. Then you have Auto Club, which is going to have its final race as a 2-mile D-shaped oval before it makes its conversion to a half-mile short track in 2022, which I think is going to be crazy. And, you know, the rest of this is pretty much unchanged. You have Las Vegas, March the 7th, Phoenix on March the 14th, and then you have Atlanta Motor Speedway on March the 21st. You know, pretty standard stuff, all Sunday races. But then we get to the first big one, the first big change of the year. Bristol on Sunday, March the 28th. It's a dirt race. Yep. It's going to be an historic event because for the first time in over half a century, the Cup Series is returning to dirt. You know, and I'll be honest here. I mean, I'm honestly not surprised. I mean, Bristol. I mean, and here's the thing. This is kind of a situation that kind of reminds me of Charlotte in a way. Because for the longest time, you know, the Charlotte Motor Speedway had 2 points paying races and the All-Star race. And of course, you had the All-Star race, you know, which is a big deal, and you also had their Memorial Day Classic, part of the Memorial Day, you know, Super Weekend, with F1's Monaco Grand Prix, then IndyCar's the Indianapolis 500, and of course, the World 600, as it used to be known before Coca-Cola took over naming rights, and they've had the naming rights for a long time now, and it's now known as the Coca-Cola 600, one of the crown jewels of NASCAR. Well, its 2nd race was kind of the forgotten one, so to speak. And there was a lot of speculation that, you know, Charlotte's 2nd date might get shipped elsewhere. And that's when Marcus Smith, God bless him, came up with a crazy idea. An absolutely ridiculous idea. So ridiculous it worked. They said, you know what? Let's turn this 2nd race into something memorable. Because otherwise it's just an ordinary 500-mile race on a mile and a half. Like, who the fuck wants to watch that, considering how many other mile-and-a-half ovals we've had? So let's turn it into an infield road course race. And there were a lot of people that were basically poo-pooing it, shitting all over it, basically, oh, this is gonna be a disaster, you know, especially, you know, considering, you know, they were shitting all over the backstretch chicane, you know, and all this stuff, considering the crashes that they had in practice. They're saying, oh, this race is going to be a disaster. And it ended up being a Race of the Year candidate. And all those people that were shitting all over this race all of a sudden had a shit ton of egg on their face. And that's why I always say, don't count your chickens before they hatch. And I've been getting a very similar feeling about this Bristol dirt race. You know, personally, I'm excited for it, you know, because I want to see what the fuck happens. And here's the thing. I know Bristol has been giving us a lot of good racing as it is. But this is a similar situation to Charlotte, you know. The spring Bristol race, because, you know, the Bristol night race has always been a late summer classic, you know, and it's considered one of the unofficial majors of NASCAR because, you know, it's like Dale Jr. said when he won it in 2004. He said this was one of the biggest wins of his career, and he was asked, why is that? And he said, it's Bristol, baby. And, of course, Bristol has, you know, marketed that catchphrase, and they even have it out in front of the track now on a sign, you know what I mean? But, I mean, Dale Jr. considered it one of the biggest wins of his career, you know what I mean? So the night race has always been, you know, a late summer classic, and for the longest time, it was the hardest ticket to get in NASCAR because it was such a big event, you know. And of course, you know, the craziness of short track racing kind of lent to that as well. But to that same effect, the spring race had always kind of been the forgotten one, even though Bristol has given us a lot of great, you know, racing. You know, because let's be honest, the spring race has always been, for the last couple of years, have been race of the year candidates. And yet its attendance has completely suffered because even though the racing has been great, there's just nothing that kind of makes it stand out, which sucks. Because, like I said, the racing has been great, especially in the spring race, you know? And it sucks that, you know, attendance has not been good for the spring race. You know, and I've been to the spring race on a couple of different occasions, and I've enjoyed myself every single time. You know, but Bristol kind of had to, you know, spice things up, and, you know, adding something as crazy as a dirt race, I mean, it definitely shakes things up. And a lot of people have been poo-pooing it and say, oh, it's similar to what we saw with the ROVAL a couple years ago when it was first introduced. Oh, this is going to be a disaster. It's going to be a total clown show. And to that I say, I mean, did you really learn your lesson from, you know, your poo-pooing of the Charlotte ROVAL? Like, don't count your chickens before they hatch, people. Let's let this race play out, and if it's a shit show, then we'll call it then. Don't call it 5 months in advance. Because if it ends up being a race of the year candidate, much like the ROVAL race in 2018 was, you're going to look like a fucking idiot. So my advice to you is don't. Don't be making any of those stupid predictions until after we see this race. I mean, if it's a bad race, we'll call it a bad race then. Let's not do it right now because it makes you look foolish. Moving on. Then after the Bristol dirt race, we have Sunday, April the 4th off because that's Easter weekend. Then we have Martinsville on Saturday, April the 10th. So a Saturday night race. That's pretty cool. Then you have Richmond on Sunday, April the 18th, which I find pretty interesting. Then we have Talladega on April the 25th. Kansas on May the 2nd. Darlington gets a second date back. So it got one of those dates from one of the other tracks. So it's getting 2 dates once again. Sunday, May the 9th, which is Mother's Day? Is it Mother's Day? Mother's Day weekend? That they're getting this race back? Basically the Rebel 400 as it used to be known. Because it was after 2003 that they lost both of their... well, they lost one of their 2 dates. They lost the spring race. And then they lost their Labor Day spot, but then they eventually got it back. So now they're getting the second date back. Because, you know... I mean, it was the one track that held 3 cup races this year. The only track that I can think of that's done so. So I said, you know what, let's do it. So Darlington gets a second race. But pretty much, I'm just going to say this right now, the playoffs are pretty much, for 2021, are pretty much unchanged. You know, you have Darlington, Richmond, Bristol, Las Vegas, Talladega, the Charlotte ROVAL. The only thing that's going to be different is Texas and Kansas swap dates. But other than that, the playoffs for this schedule is pretty much the same. So, but it's the regular season before it. That's fucking crazy. But you have Darlington the first time on May the 9th, and you have Dover's lone race on Sunday, May the 16th, and then Sunday, May the 23rd. Circuit of the Americas. So, Texas Motor Speedway has had 2 dates for many years now. And, you know, they decided, well, we're going to get the All-Star race this year, which is going to be on June 13th. But you're going to be losing one of your 2 points dates as a result. Now, obviously, they're going to keep their playoff date because I'm pretty sure that was part of the negotiation as well. But they shipped that second Texas date to Circuit of the Americas. And I have been long stating that, you know, I think we need to give Circuit of the Americas a shot in the Cup Series. I mean, even if it doesn't work out, I mean, let's give it a shot at the very least. You know what I mean? And, you know, the reason why we're getting all this crazy shit now is because that 5-year track agreement is finally coming to an end after this year, which is allowing all these changes to take place at long last. But yeah, that's one of those races I got circled. It's Circuit of the Americas. That's I'm going to be really interested to see how that goes. Then, of course, you have the Coca-Cola 600 on May the 30th at Charlotte. Then you have Sonoma on June the 6th. Can't remember if that's its usual date. I know it's sometime in June because usually it slots in right before July 4th weekend at Daytona. So I think it's a little bit earlier than it usually is, but you know, that's fine. Sonoma on June the 6th. It had its race canceled this year due to COVID, which kind of sucks. And of course, you have the All-Star race at Texas. And then Nashville Super Speedway gets its first ever Cup race on June the 20th. Again, don't really know how that's going to work out, especially since they haven't been racing there in almost a decade. But, you know, who knows? Maybe it'll be a good race. Maybe it'll be shit. We don't know at this point. We just have to wait and see. Then comes the track where I really think should have lost one of its 2 dates. Pocono. It's going to get its Pocono doubleheader. Probably because they want to try it with fans since they didn't really get a chance to do so this year. But let's be completely honest here. We tried the doubleheaders, and by doubleheaders I mean Saturday and Sunday edition, on 3 different occasions this year. We tried it at Dover, we tried it at Michigan, and we tried it at Pocono. All 3 sucked. Okay? And I said, no more doubleheaders. It's fucking pointless. Because, you know, if with a doubleheader, you know, if there's a driver that's dominant in one race, they're going to be dominant in the other one. And that's pretty much what we saw. And in all 3 doubleheaders, it was Hamlin or Harvick. So, no. I don't like the Pocono doubleheader. I mean, I guess on the one hand, it's good that we're getting them out of the way in one shot, but, I mean, let's be honest here. Pocono doesn't need 2 dates. It just doesn't. So, I really think for 2022, one of those 2 dates need to go somewhere else. Just my opinion. And then July the 4th, which had always been typically Daytona. This year, it was supposed to be Indianapolis, which I think it still was. But in 2021, it's going to be the long-awaited return of Road America. Yep, the last time the Cup Series ran at Road America was all the way back in 1956. Holy shit. Can't believe it's been that long. So, it took, for some, I don't know why, I mean, can somebody explain to me why it took 65 years for the Cup Series to return to Road America? Especially considering that they've been the Xfinity Series has been racing there since I think 2011. So Xfinity has been there for more than a decade now, almost a decade now. You know, I don't know why it took so long for the Cup Series to go there, but fair is fair. And considering that Road America usually gives us some damn good racing in the Xfinity Series, I'll be looking forward to seeing how the Cup Series tackles Elkhart Lake. And, of course, considering that they have rain tires now, which we're going to be talking about with the race review, yeah, Road America is going to be one of those that I'm going to be looking forward to. And then we go to Atlanta a second time. Atlanta is another one of those races that used to have 2 dates, then lost one of them due to attendance issues, but now they're getting that second date back. This time Sunday, July the 11th. The reason why I think Atlanta is getting a second date once again is because they have a project that they're trying to do where they're trying to turn Atlanta Motor Speedway into kind of a one-stop shop. In addition to the racetrack itself, they're going to try to build a theme park and like a casino, hotel, like in the same like general area, on the same land as the Atlanta Motor Speedway, to kind of make it like a more attractive kind of stop on the schedule. So I think that's one of the reasons why Atlanta is getting its second date back. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But also, there were some reports stating that Atlanta might be looking to reconfigure in the near future, because Atlanta, it's asphalt, it's past its prime. I mean, it is long overdue. I mean, I know the drivers like it, but the track surface has gotten way too abrasive, and it is really old. I mean, there are cracks in the racetrack. They keep having to repair and refill. It's been long overdue for a repave. So one of the things that they may do, we don't know if they're actually going to do this, but one of the things that they may do is a reconfiguration of the track. Maybe a reconfiguration back to its old layout, the old oval, 2 straights and 2 turns. Who knows? Then you have New Hampshire's lone date on Sunday, July the 18th, which was actually a damn good race this year, save for the third and final stage, which kind of sucks. And then they have the next 2 weeks off. They have they're off until August the 8th because of the Olympics, which was also postponed due to COVID. And NBC is going to be covering the Olympics because, you know, they have a contract with the Olympics. So from July the 18th to August the 8th, the Cup Series is going to be off due to the Olympics. And then they'll reconvene on August the 8th at Watkins Glen. Actually, they're going to have back-to-back road courses because they have Watkins Glen on August the 8th. And then basically the final big change, Indianapolis. The Brickyard 400 has been, by and large, trash for years. But next year, they're hitting the road course. Yep. Indianapolis is going to be the 6th road course on this schedule. Well, technically Charlotte is, but they've been on the schedule for a few years now. Indianapolis is the latest to add the road course to the schedule. And I think the reason why they're going to try the road course for the Cup Series is because, did you see that XFinity race at Indianapolis on the road course? That was a fucking banger. Holy shit. So I think NASCAR saw that and was like, you know what? Let's let the Cup Series have a whack at it and see what happens. And you know what? This might be what Indianapolis needs to really reignite the love for NASCAR and Indianapolis. Because, you know, when they came to Indianapolis in 1994, it was a big deal. But after that debacle in 2008 with the tire debacle, it basically lost its luster. And to be honest, the racing at Indianapolis has been less than stellar. So maybe a change to the road course might be the tonic that it needs. Then you have Michigan's lone date on Sunday, August the 22nd, which I think was a welcome change because for a long time, the schedule in the summertime was basically you had Pocono and Michigan basically right there together, and they were only like a month and a half apart, you know, which made no fucking sense whatsoever. So the fact that, you know, Pocono is going to be doing a doubleheader in June, and then you have just the one Michigan race in August, that's fine. Then you have the Coke Zero Sugar 400 at Daytona, once again as the season finale. I mean, I would honestly prefer to be back on 4th of July weekend, but, you know, it is what it is. And then, of course, the playoffs where you have basically the same as this year, save for a minor switch. You have Darlington, Richmond, and Bristol as the round of 16. Vegas, Talladega, and the Charlotte Roval as the round of 12. Texas and Kansas was really the only swap. So you have Texas, Kansas, and Martinsville for the round of 8. And Phoenix will once again host the championship race. And that is your 2021 schedule for the Cup Series. Quite the shakeup. I mean, it has been well needed. And honestly, I'm looking forward to 2021 and seeing how a lot of these new races work out. You know, I think it's going to be a very anticipated season, to say the least, because you got the Bristol Dirt Race, Atlanta's on twice, Darlington's twice. You have Circuit of the Americas, the All-Star Race at Texas, which I mean, I'll give it a shot. You have Nashville Super Speedway on the schedule, Road America on the schedule, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway transitioning to the road course. So 2021, I think, is looking like fire right now, and hopefully it will be, because these changes have been a long time coming, and they've been much needed, because the schedule has been extremely stagnant for way too long, and this is the changes that we've needed. And in 2022, you have Auto Club transitioning to a short track. So, and if it's a successful venture for them, especially considering that it's going to really help them with their upkeep costs, because they won't have as big of a venue to upkeep. A lot of other 1.5 and 2 mile tracks might say, that might be the way to go for the future. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much it for news of the week. Of course, the 2021 schedule is going to be the big talking point this week. Man, that took up 45 minutes. Holy shit, that's quite the segment. We still got the fucking review to go through, and there's a lot to talk about there too. Like I said, lots to talk about this week. So without further ado, at long last, let's get into the review itself, shall we? All right, so here we go. 2020 Bank of America ROVAL 400. The cutoff for the round of 12. So stages broke down like this. Stages 1 and 2 were 25 laps, with stage 3 being 59 laps. And as I said before, this is the first Cup race to start on the rain tires, the wet weather tires. The intermediate tires, as they call them in Formula One, the grooved tires, which basically help push the water out of the tires. So right off the bat, this was an historic race. Of course, we've seen it in the Xfinity series. Of course, we saw it the night before, because that was a fucking crazy race. So while it wasn't technically raining, it was a wet racetrack, and they needed to get on the wet tires. And so this was a historic moment in NASCAR. The first time ever that the Cup Series has run on the wet tires, the intermediates. So a pretty big deal. And you think, well, man, these guys are gonna, wreck and race, slide all over the place. Not really. And this race was pretty damn interesting from the get-go. So Denny Hamlin started from pole, but Keselowski gets a run in the backstretch chicane and takes the lead right off the bat. Elliott gets by Hamlin for second in the backstretch chicane. What was a bigger surprise was Ty Dillon was super competitive early in this race on the rain tires. He was passing good cars for position, like Kevin Harvick, for instance. Like, legitimately. He was passing Kevin Harvick and getting up into the top 5. Like, holy shit, dude. He made his way up to 4th and then passed Hamlin for 3rd, so it's like, damn, he's actually doing good. So Hamlin was struggling a bit, and he actually struggled quite a bit in this race. Elliott challenges Kes for the lead on the outside of Heartburn Turn and takes the lead. No disconnected controllers into Heartburn Turn this year, much unlike the last 2 years. So we have our first pure lead change on lap 8, and you're thinking, man, Chase Elliott's in the lead, he's going to run away with this. No, not necessarily. This was actually a very competitive race. Truex gets by Keselowski for second, so you basically have the 2 road course aces of the last couple years at the front. Boyer gets by Keselowski for third. Boyer was really good in this race until a power steering failure with about 45 laps left him with a hard car to handle, and we'll get to that later. And then we have a 3-way battle for the lead between Elliott, Truex, and Boyer. Then we have our first caution on lap 11, which was a competition caution. I'm just going to be completely honest here. Competition cautions are a fucking waste of time. They really are. But most drivers come in for service. Ty Dillon is the first one to put on the slick tires, because NASCAR said, after, you start with the wet tires, after that, it's up to you to decide whether you want to stay on the intermediates or the slicks, or go to the slicks. And it was actually Ty Dillon and Ryan Newman who decided to go to the slick tires. Didn't really work out so well for Ryan Newman. Definitely worked out for Ty Dillon, though. Elliott leads on the restart. Truex gets a better restart and takes the lead, with Boyer right behind him in second. Boyer manages to take the lead from Truex before the lap is even complete. So Truex took the lead at the restart, but then Boyer gets by him before that lap is complete. And this was ending up sending shockwaves through the playoff field because Boyer was one of those below the cut line, and this was causing Bowman Bowman even reported that he was not feeling well because he was feeling a bit of anxiety coming into this race because of the fact that he was basically on the razor's edge to get into the round of 8, which he really wanted to do. And Clint Boyer taking the lead here really put him in danger because Boyer was below the cut line, and a win automatically gets you in, and that would have moved the cut line, and he would have been Bowman would have been below it. So yeah, that was pretty stressful. Newman spins on the infield section but keeps going, so he was really struggling on the slicks. But a dry groove was starting to develop in the racetrack, and Ty Dillon was taking advantage of it. He was much faster on those wet tires. In some cases, he was 4, 5, or even 6 seconds faster on the slick tires. Good grief, dude. And it was at that point that the intermediate tires were really starting to give up way too much time. So Christopher Bell and Jimmy Johnson came in for slick tires. Kurt Busch gets by Elliott for third. Ty Dillon manages to get up to second and is just fucking fast on the slick tires. While Boyer was still on the intermediate tires, and he was going to try to make it all the way to the end. But due to the fact that the track was drying out, because one of the things with the intermediate tires is that they're soft. They're much softer than the slick tires, and that's what they need to be in order to get grip. But if they heat up too much, then they're going to start to chunk, and they wear out much faster than the slick tires do, and they chunk, and that really puts a lot of drivers in danger of blowing one out. And Boyer was staying out there for quite a while, and they were going to try to make it to the end of the race, or not to the end of the race, but the end of the stage. And there was a lot of concern that he might have blown one out, if he didn't get a caution. So Dillon basically passed him easily on the slick tire. So that's our second pure lead change on lap 21. Ty Dillon to the lead. How often have we said that? Denny Hamlin spins on the infield section but gets back going. But then we have our second caution on lap 23 when John Hunter Nemechek spins off in turn 6, which was a real trouble spot in this race. He actually manages to get back going again, but takes the Echo Park sign with him. I'll tell you what, the companies who put their name on those signs, I mean, they're really appreciative because they basically get free advertising. And it seems like every year that happens. So Ty Dillon leads on the restart with 1 lap to go in the stage, so we basically got a 1-lap shootout. Timmy Hill was up to third at this point in the 66 car. He actually ended up finishing 5th in the stage. Unfortunately, he fell out of the race later on with mechanical issues, which kind of sucks. But the fact that he actually finished top 5 in the stage is just shows you how crazy wet weather can be, or a wet racetrack can be. But Ty Dillon ends up winning stage number 1 with Christopher Bell finishing 2nd. This is already a crazy looking race. Several drivers come in for service, mainly for slick tires. Then we get to stage number 2, 25 laps. And based on his finish in stage 1, Kevin Harvick would clinch a spot in the round of 8. Of course, he had a shit ton of points anyway. And even though he was basically irrelevant in this round, I mean, it didn't really matter because, he had so many points from the, regular season with all the fucking wins that he has. And of course, all the bonus points that I got for winning the regular season title. So, and we're going to get to this in a little bit, but he's plus 45, starting the round of 8, And we're going to, the next 4 tracks, the last 4 tracks on the schedule, he's all won it. He's won at Kansas, he's won at Texas. He's actually won the fall Texas race, I think, the last 3 years. So he's going to be an obvious favorite there. And he's won at Martinsville before, and of course Phoenix, which is, a track that he's absolutely dominated. I think he has 9 wins at Phoenix. So yeah, Harvick is still the clear-cut favorite. This round was not necessarily good for him, but this round is full of tracks that he wasn't really, good at, to be honest. So, But round of 8 is where he's really going to shine again, I think. He's going to be a threat in the round of 8 and in the championship, I think. But Christopher Bell leads the start of stage 2. There were still some parts of the track that were damp, and in fact, because of the nature of the infield, there were still like pockets of water, like on the rumble strips, that were actually dripping down the track, which made some parts still slick, even for the drivers. So even though it was drying out, there were still parts that had like running water. So it's pretty slick in some cases, and which actually caused some drivers some issues. But it wasn't too much of an issue because we didn't really see as much trouble as we all kind of expected. But William Byron, with a great run into Heartburn turn, takes the lead, but almost throws it away in turn 3. Like I said, gets up into that wet stuff, but he actually held on to it for a third pure lead change on lap 30. And then we had fucking stink bugs on one of the camera shots, which I thought was pretty funny. Kez spins in turn 4, causing Jones and Matt DiBenedetto to have to come to a complete stop to avoid piling into the back of him, which they did a good job. So good job on all of their parts. Bell spins off turn 4 while running second, but keeps going. Ryan Blaney beginning to catch Byron for the race lead. Ryan Newman spins on the back chicane, but gets back going again. Newman did not have a good time in this race. Almirola spins in turn 4, gets back going, so we're starting to see the spin lulls. Blaney gets a great run on Byron at Heartburn turn to take the lead. That seemed to be a great passing opportunity in this race. So we have our fourth pure lead change on lap 40. Hamlin comes in for green flag stops on lap 45, but then we get yet another caution on lap 46 when JJ Yeley spins in turn 5. He actually gets it back going again, but they decide to throw the caution here, which I thought was really unnecessary because he was able to get it back going again, but they decided to throw the yellow anyways, and to me it was just a completely unnecessary caution. And in fact, they had a couple like that, which made me put the flagman as a contender for reject of the race, which, when you see what the real reject of the race did, this is just peanuts in comparison. Most of the field comes down pit road under this caution, so Blaney leads on the restart with 2 laps to go in the stage. Kyle Busch with a flat left front tire after contact with Boyer, which really set him back. Didn't put him out of contention though, not by a long shot. Hamlin spins in turn 7 but gets it back going again, and Ryan Blaney wins stage number 2. Of course, Blaney won the inaugural ROVAL race, although he kind of walked into that one. But the leaders come in for service, and we begin stage number 3, which is 59 laps. Bell leads the start of stage 3, much like he did with stage 2. Elliott has to pit before the restart, though, with a loose left front wheel. It's a good thing he did it, though, at this point in the race. And if we learned anything from last year's race, it's don't ever count out Chase Elliott at a road course, because we all remember that he basically missed Heartburn turn in last year's race and basically bull rushed his way all the way back to the front. And here we are again, and he has to basically do the same thing again. Only this time he has a lot more time. I think last year he only had like the last 40 laps in order to do it. In this case, he had the entire third stage. Still pretty impressive though. But Byron gets to the lead on the restart. Cole Custer spins in turn 5, as does Hamlin after contact with James Davison, which pretty much destroyed the front of Davison's car. Matt DiBenedetto has to come to pit road with damage. I think he was involved in that little schmozzle as well. Ty Dillon spins coming out of the oval section, so that early great run was for naught. Boyer nearly loses it off turn 3, but somehow saves it. And it was around this point that he ended up losing power steering, so he had to run the rest of the race without power steering. And I'll tell you why that's a big deal here in a little bit. Boyer gets by Keselowski for third as Kez runs wide in turn 3. Actually, it wasn't at this point, it was a little bit later. We'll get to that in a minute, because I actually think I noted that. Yeah, there we go. We'll note that here in a minute. Caution number 4 came out on lap 65. Ty Dillon spins in turn 6. Backs down onto the unused portion of the track and gets back going, but they ended up throwing a caution anyway. They said it was for debris, but I didn't really see any debris. So again, another unnecessary caution. Byron leads on the restart. Boyer moves up to second on the restart. Blaney gets by Johnson for 5th, and then we have our 5th caution on lap 69 when Austin Dillon gets spun by Kyle Busch coming off the oval turn 4. Kyle Busch basically said, yeah, my bad. That pretty much put an end to Dylan's round of 8 hopes. I mean, they were already in the gutter to begin with, which kind of sucks because he really put on one hell of a performance in the round of 16 when everybody pretty much wrote him off. A lot of cars come in for service. Blaney leads on the restart. Stenhouse, who restarted second, gets spun by Bubba Wallace, who basically tried to shove it down in there. He does get it back going again. Boyer gets a lot of front end damage. Looked like he might have busted the radiator, but that was actually not the case. He actually damaged, I guess, the power steering pump because he reported that he had no power steering at this point. So he basically had to run the final 40 laps of this race without power steering, like I said before. And it was at this point in the race, after this restart, which is pretty freaking crazy considering what he was able to do. It wasn't enough to keep him from being eliminated, but, you know, hats off to him nonetheless. Ryan Blaney actually spins out of the lead off of turn number 4 after getting off the track and into the grass. He does get it back going again, but that was a big mental error. So that means we had our 5th pure lead change, even though I don't know if you consider it pure, but I mean, it is an official lead change. And it's Ryan Preece. Yes, the 37 car leads on lap 74. And then this is when it really started getting good. We had 4 cars under a blanket for the race lead. We had Preece, we had Bowman, we had Logano, we had Eric Jones, and then Chase Elliott catches them from behind, so he manages to get all the way back up into the top 5 at this point after having to pit for a loose wheel. And then Kyle Busch was not far behind them, so we had 6 cars within 3 seconds of each other with 30 laps to go for the race lead. And I was like, this is going to get good. And it was getting good. Kyle Busch gets by Jones for 5th. Elliott gets by Logano for 3rd. And Bowman was like, oh shit, I better get going here. And then Bowman gets by Preece in turn 4. But then he runs turn 5 a little bit wide, which allows Chase Elliott to get a run on him into turn 6. But Bowman was able to hold him off at least for one more lap. 5 cars under a blanket at this point. They were like 2 wide as coming onto the turn 1 oval. Oval turn 1, I should say, out of the infield. And it's like, holy shit, this is some damn good racing. So we have our 6th pure lead change on lap 82. And it was at this point that they said that weather was not that far away. And I was thinking, oh shit, that's something else for these guys to worry about. Thinking about, man, we might be going back on rain tires if the weather does get here, which it never did. But still, that's something that they're going to be thinking about. But Truex and Kurt Busch ended up joining the party at this point. So we had 8 cars right there together for the lead. But then Elliott gets by Bowman for the lead in turn 6 for a 7th pure lead change of the day on lap 85. Kyle Busch gets by Logano for 3rd. And then we have our 6th caution on lap 86 for debris. At the same time, Matt Kenseth buried the 42 car into the turn 3 barrier. Don't really know how he did that. Then pretty much everybody came to pit road at this point except for Kyle Busch. Adam Stevens decided to leave him on the track, and it was pretty much a dumb move because, I mean, he was short on fuel. He actually ended up having to pit for fuel at the end of the race, and he was out there on old tires. I mean, with everybody coming in, if he would have come in as well and got tires, and considering how good that 18 pit crew is, I mean, he would have been a contender for this race win. He probably wouldn't have won because, of course, Elliott, but he would have at least had a shot. This basically took him completely out of the running. But, be that as it may, he led on the restart, and he had his teammates around him. He had Denny Hamlin around him. He had Eric Jones. Christopher Bell was there, even though he's not technically a teammate. He will be next year. But it didn't really matter because very tight in the turn number 1. Actually, and Eric Jones actually gets by Busch for the race lead in turn 6. I mean, he was basically out there for his own accord because he's looking for a job next year pretty much. So he gets the 8th pure lead change on lap 91, but it didn't really take long for Elliott to track him down. He got up to 2nd and gets side by side with and passes Eric Jones for the lead, coming out of the infield section for a 9th and final pure lead change of the day on lap 92. And from there, it was pretty much all Elliott. So he had to work for it, for sure. But by the time he got the lead on lap 92, it was pretty much all she wrote. John Hunter Nemechek spins on the front stretch, but gets it back going again. Logano gets by Busch for 4th at the front chicane. Then we have our 7th and final caution on lap 97. When Brennan Poole comes to a stop on the apron in the Oval 3 and 4. So several drivers coming for service. Elliott leads on the restart with 10 laps to go. And he basically just gets away as Logano moves up to second, but he's just not able to catch Elliott because Elliott is the road course king right now. Michael now spins on the back chicane, gets it back going again, but then spins on the front chicane as well. No caution though. Kurt Busch gets by Eric Jones for third. Newman gets spun twice on the front stretch, so his bad day just continues to get worse. Truex spins in the back chicane, and he actually accidentally took Kurt Busch with him, but Kurt actually did recover really quickly and actually managed to still get a top 5. And Chase Elliott wins at the Roval for his 4th straight road course win, which puts him into second all-time in that category. As his 3rd win of the year, and he won both of the road course races this year because there were only 2 this year due to the whole COVID shit. He won the Daytona road course race, and he won the Charlotte road course race. So there you go. And then right at the finish, Josh Bilicki blows a right rear tire in the Oval 3 and 4 at the finish. So that was basically it. That was your Charlotte Roval race. And eliminated from the playoff is Kyle Busch, which he did say he was going to get eliminated, but I mean, it wasn't from a lack of trying, I'll tell you that much. Clint Bowyer, Austin Dillon, and Eric Almirola, who basically had a pretty shit-tastic race as well. Those are the 4 drivers that have been eliminated from the playoff here in the round of 12. This was a damn good race, and we didn't have any of the controversial shit that plagued the previous race, so that's a good thing. So, without further ado, let's look at the results and point standings and all that other stuff, so we can finally end this fucking video. Alright, so it's time for the results, points, numbers, and all that other good shit. Lead change count. Let's start with that. We had 16 overall lead changes in this race, which is more than both Poconos and Indianapolis. As well as, there are several other races that this race had more overall lead changes than, I mean, it had more lead changes than a lot of oval races this year. So there you go. And in addition to that, we had 9 pure lead changes in this race, which is just crazy for a road course race. I mean, typically the number is usually between 3 and 5. You know, sometimes it might be a little bit less than that. I mean, I know Sonoma last year didn't have any. But 9 pure lead changes in a road course race. That's pretty freaking good. Very, very competitive in this race. Yeah, I would say this is a pretty good race, especially considering the lead change count and how competitive it was. Driver of the race, or star of the race, I should say. I am going to give it to Mr. Clint Bowyer, because he lost power steering with about 40 laps left in the race, and he muscled that fucking car. I mean, we've seen how, you know, if you lose power steering in these cars, they're pretty much undrivable. I think Brad Keselowski had to retire from a race earlier this season due to power steering issues. But Clint Bowyer, man, he had power steering issues in this race about just past the midway point, and he muscled that fucking car around to a 10th place finish. And even though it wasn't enough to save him from being eliminated, you know, the fact that he was able to muscle that car into a top 10 finish is just absolutely incredible. And after the race, he basically collapsed next to his car and basically had to go to the infield care center. Because I think he was pretty much dehydrated. You know, he was exhausted. I mean, after having a manhandle a 3,400-pound race car without power steering, you know, for basically the last half of the race, I mean, for him to come home with a top 10 finish, my hat's off to Clint Bowyer on one hell of an effort, to say the least. I mean, muscling that car around without power steering on a fucking road course, I mean, that's hard enough. But to come home with a top 10 finish, major props, dude. That was impressive. So he is my star of the race for the ROVAL. Then we come to reject of the race, and there were actually a few contenders for this one. I mean, I could have given it to the flagman, you know, for throwing 2 very questionable cautions during this race. I could have given it to Adam Stevens with that extremely questionable pit strategy on Kyle Busch. which ended up pretty much taking him out of contention to win, when he probably should have pitted for tires, which would have made him a contender. But the actual reject of the race, I mean, in comparison, the flagman and Adam Stevens, I mean, it's nothing to talk about compared to what this guy did. And my reject of this race is Jim Utter. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jim Utter is, he is a editor for motorsport.com. And it's been well documented that this guy is a fucking asshole. And during this race, it was reported that Alex Bowman had not been feeling well coming into this race due to some anxiety problems, because he was worried about what was going on with this championship and shit like that. And considering that he was on the razor's edge coming into this race, and with Clint Boyer running well, he was in danger of being knocked out, and he wanted to make it to the round of 8. And he did say afterwards that he appreciated all the support, and did say that his anxiety had calmed since he did make it into the round of 8. But Jim Utter basically made a tweet where he made a hashtag #AnxietyAlex, basically mocking Alex Bowman's anxiety. And considering the fact that there are a lot of people that really struggle with anxiety, and considering the fact that yesterday was National Mental Health Awareness Day, which I think is what it was, there's something about mental health awareness. Considering that anxiety affects a lot of people and it really affects them in their day-to-day life, anxiety is nothing to fucking joke around with. I mean, there's certain things that you just don't joke about. Cancer, AIDS, that sort of shit. I mean, that sort of shit you don't joke around with. And anxiety fits that bill. And not only did Jim Utter, put out that hashtag in a tweet, he doubled down and tripled down on it. And he actually eventually finally deleted those tweets, but not until early this morning. I mean, he basically left them up all through the night and into this morning. And he has been getting a lot of backlash, and rightfully so. I mean, he did issue a quote-unquote apology, but I think it's pretty much a non-apology. And it's actually starting to rain. Holy shit. But, considering that this isn't the first time that Jim Utter has been a total fuckhead, I mean, I don't believe the apology one second. And honestly, this is not the first time that Jim Utter has been a total asshole. Y'all remember when he had Michael McDowell's car towed when Michael McDowell accidentally parked in his parking spot? Remember that shit? Yeah. I think it was at Vegas last year, if memory serves me correctly. Or was it this year? Fuck. Was it this year? I don't even remember, but yeah, but bottom line is, this is not the first time that Jim Utter has been a total fucking dickhead. And this is just the latest example. Maybe if this was a, first offense, so to speak, then I might believe it. But considering the fact that this has been, a repeated pattern of behavior with Jim Utter, I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. And the fact of the matter is, I think motorsport.com needs to get rid of his ass. Because, I mean, this has been a pattern of behavior with him, and, this is going to only make motorsport.com look bad for having this guy on their payroll. So, especially when you're tweeting out stupid bullshit like this. And it's like I said with Kyle Larson earlier this year. When you are employed by a company that has the visibility that motorsport.com is, you are basically a face of that company, and anything that you do is completely reflective on them. And when you are as an antagonistic as you are with these fucking tweets, I mean, it just makes the company look bad because they have you on their payroll, So, I mean, I'll be honestly very shocked if motorsport.com doesn't do like some sort of disciplinary action, or, do the thing that they should be doing and terminate his ass. Because quite frankly, I mean, here's the thing. I don't even think he enjoys covering the sport, because I mean, some of the things that some of his tweets, about things that go on are just completely half-assed. Much like his apology. I mean, if he doesn't enjoy, covering the sport, then why the fuck is he even covering it to begin with? That's just my opinion, though. I mean, but Jim Utter, he's a fucking dickhead. It's been well documented, and honestly, motorsport.com just needs to get rid of him. That's just the bottom line. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the race results, and then we'll look at the round of 8 grid as we head into Kansas next week. So, top 10 finishers. Chase Elliott started second. He led only 27 of the 109 laps, so it wasn't as dominant as you might think. But once he got in the lead at the end, that was pretty much it. And he made it through to the round of 8. Of course, he would have been in on points anyway, but that win actually gives him an extra 5 playoff points, which actually puts him into the round of 4, the championship round, right at the moment. So he's starting out the round of 8 and plus 5. So that win actually is a big difference, because he gets those 5 extra playoff points. Joey Logano comes home second. Eric Jones, good run. I mean, he's actually been running good. Since he didn't make the playoffs, he's actually been running really good. So I'll honestly be very surprised if he doesn't get a ride next year. I mean, obviously he's a good driver. Let's be honest here. If you don't make a 16-team playoff, I mean, you probably just had a shitty year. But I mean, he's been really underperforming in that 20 car. So I mean, I will be surprised, since he has been picking it up lately, though. I mean, he has been running really good as of late. It's just too little, too late. But I'll be surprised if he's not in a Cup car next year. Kurt Busch, despite getting spun at the end of the race, not intentionally, but it's just the way it is. He did recover to get a top 5. He was through to the round of 8 anyway, based on his Vegas win. Ryan Blaney comes home 5th. William Byron in 6th. Martin Truex Jr. In 7th, he made it through on points. So did Alex Bowman. Cole Custer with a top 10 finish, and of course the aforementioned Clint Bowyer with a 10th place finish despite no power steering. And here is the bracket for the round of 8. Kansas, Texas, and Martinsville. So starting out with, you have Harvick, of course, as the number 1. Hamlin at number 2. Keselowski at number 3. Chase Elliott into the top 4. And the guys starting below the cut line are Joey Logano, Martin Truex Jr., Alex Bowman, and Kurt Busch. But as Kurt Busch showed us in the round of 12, all it takes is 1 win to get into the championship 4. And that is your grid for the round of 8, which means that Eric Almirola, Kyle Busch, Clint Bowyer, and Austin Dillon, as I said before, have been eliminated from this year's playoff. As for my final rating for the Bank of America ROVAL 400, this was a great race. Historic implications, with the introduction of the intermediates for the first time. Chase Elliott chasing history, with his 4th consecutive road course win. Now just 2 away from Jeff Gordon, and we'll see if he can pull it off next year. At least equal the record next year, and he's got more than enough chances to do so. But considering how competitive this race was, and the high number of lead changes, and just zaniness of this race, I mean, this was a damn good race, a damn good road course race. Some people say, "Oh, it's just an imitation road course." So, fact of the matter is, it's been putting on some of the best racing of the year. And like I said, people were poo-pooing the first race at the ROVAL, and it ended up being a race of the year candidate. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. The ROVAL, from the looks of it, the ROVAL was here to stay. And if you don't like it, oh well. But, yeah, this was a damn enjoyable race. Eric Estep gave it a 90% on his Ruby gauge, which is basically a 9 out of 10. And I agree. I think that's going to be my rating for this race. It gets a 9 out of 10. I mean, the finish left a lot to be desired. I mean, we didn't have any crazy shenanigans at the finish. But, I mean, be that as it may, considering the historic implications and the fact that this was actually a really competitive race, I think a 9 out of 10 is a very fair score. And it gets a huge thumbs up. So that's going to do it for this episode of The Fuel. Yet another long-ass episode. But a lot of good things to talk about this time around as opposed to last week. So, good shit. Hopefully the round of 8 will produce some good racing. I mean, Kansas is kind of hit or miss. Texas has mostly missed. And Martinsville, kind of hit or miss as well. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But that's going to do it for this week on The Fuel. Another long-ass episode. We only have 4 races left. We're almost to the end of the year. Thank goodness, because it's been a pretty tumultuous year to say the least. But thank you very much for watching this week. And until next time, this is the Packer Man signing out. See you later. You better like and subscribe or face the consequences. You have been warned.